The wind howled across the barren plateau of the colony, whipping sand and dust in swirling clouds that made the few remaining structures creak and groan. Captain Elia's corps stood at the edge of the settlement, his coat pulled tightly around his shoulders, eyes scanning the horizon. Life at Haven Station had always been hard. A few hundred humans lived here on the edge of explored space, far from Earth, far from anyone who could help if things went wrong. Supplies were scarce, storms were frequent, and the planet's thin atmosphere made every breath a conscious effort. Elias had learned to endure it all, but even he had never seen anything like the storm approaching that evening. The first signs were subtle, a faint flicker of light in the distance, followed by the deep rumble of meteor impacts. Elias squinted, trying to make out the source. Then he saw it, a small spacecraft, no larger than a shuttle, tumbling out of control through the storm, sparks flying from its hull as it spun in a deadly spiral. Without thinking, Elias started running, shouting for anyone nearby to follow. The storm made movement difficult, but his determination pushed him forward. By the time he reached the crash site, the shuttle had collided with a jagged rock outcropping, tearing a gash down its side. Smoke rose in thick black plumes, and flames licked at the edges of the wreckage. He paused for a moment, taking in the scene. The shuttle was almost completely destroyed, but he noticed something moving inside, a figure struggling through the smoke and debris. Without hesitation, Elias ran into the wreckage, weaving between burning metal and falling panels. The heat singed his face, but he ignored it, his focus entirely on the small, struggling shape. The closer he got, the more he could see. It was a woman, or at least something humanoid, lying half-buried under twisted metal. Her skin glimmered faintly, as if reflecting colors from a hidden spectrum. Her eyes were closed, and faint lines of blood ran along her temple and arm. Elias crouched beside her and checked her pulse. It was weak, but there was still life. Relief mixed with urgency. He had to act fast. "Hold on," he muttered, his hands already moving. He ripped a strip of cloth from his coat and began to bandage the wound on her arm. She stirred slightly but made no sound. Her body was light, almost unnaturally so, but her strength seemed to drain from her with every movement. Elias' mind raced. He had treated many injuries in his life, broken bones, burns, lacerations, but he had never seen anyone like this before. He didn't even know what species she was. The storm raged around them, but Elias kept working, oblivious to the sand and rain pelting his face. Finally, the bleeding slowed, and he gently lifted her onto his back, careful not to worsen her injuries. "We're going back to the colony," he said firmly, though he wasn't sure she could understand him. As he ran, he noticed something strange, faint streaks of light that seemed to flow across her skin whenever she moved. He couldn't explain it, but he didn't have time to think. Right now, survival was all that mattered. Back at Haven Station, the colony's small medical bay was a chaos of lights and alarms. The colonists had seen him carrying the figure and gathered around, whispering in fear and awe. Some pointed, others tried to help, but Elias waved them back. "Step aside," he said. "We don't know what we're dealing with. She's injured badly, but she's alive. That's what matters right now." Hours passed. The storm outside continued to pound the colony, rattling windows and walls. But inside the medical bay, the focus was entirely on the mysterious woman. She remained unconscious, her chest rising and falling steadily, but her eyes never opened. Elias sat beside her, exhausted, yet unwilling to leave her side. His mind wandered. Who was she? How had she ended up here? And most importantly, was she dangerous? He didn't see any weapons on her, only elegance and a strange aura that seemed to hum in the room. Around midnight, a faint sound drew his attention, a soft murmur, almost like the whisper of a distant wind. He leaned closer, tilting his head. The woman's lips moved, forming words in a language he didn't recognize. The sound was melodic, almost musical, and yet it carried a weight he could feel in his chest. Goosebumps ran over his skin. He had treated many patients in his life, but never had he encountered something so extraordinary. "Elias," she whispered suddenly, and his eyes widened. It was his name. How could she know? He blinked, then leaned closer, asking cautiously, "Do you know where you are?" She didn't answer in words, only opened her eyes slightly. They were the color of distant galaxies, swirling with patterns that seemed to shift and change. Elias felt a strange pull, a sense of calm mixed with awe. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving a layer of dust and debris over the colony. The colonists began clearing the damage, but Elias remained focused on her. She still hadn't spoken clearly, but she could respond to his touch and to small movements. When he held her hand, she squeezed it slightly, and he could feel a faint warmth emanating from her skin. It was unlike anything he had felt before. As he prepared breakfast for himself, he kept glancing at her, studying her features. Her body was slender but strong, and her presence commanded attention even while unconscious. He realized that caring for her was no longer just a duty, it had become a responsibility that weighed on him like nothing before. Every instinct in him told him to protect her, to ensure that whatever had happened to her didn't happen again. Midday brought new surprises. One of the scouts reported a strange anomaly on the edge of the colony's radar. It wasn't a ship, not exactly, but something moving through space with impossible speed. Elias frowned, a cold feeling settling in his chest. He had no idea what it was, but his instincts told him it was connected to the woman. He hurried to her bedside, watching the faint lines of energy that seemed to dance across her skin. She stirred, lifting her head slightly and looking toward the window as if sensing the approaching danger. The colonists gathered again, murmuring anxiously. Some whispered about aliens, others about curses or ancient powers. Elias ignored them. He focused on her, speaking softly. "Whatever comes, we face it together," he said. His voice was firm, full of conviction. She looked at him then, eyes locking with his, and for the first time she spoke in a language he understood. "Protect me," she said, her voice weak but commanding. Elias' heart pounded. He had expected confusion, perhaps fear, but not this clarity. The weight of her words settled heavily on him. She was not helpless, she had purpose, and now it was his duty to ensure her safety. Over the next few hours, he worked tirelessly to stabilize her. He administered nutrients, checked her vitals, and made sure the temporary bandages held. Every now and then, she would murmur in her strange tongue, and Elias would respond, though he did not understand the meaning. The connection between them grew, not through words, but through shared attention and care. He began to sense her emotions, fear, exhaustion, determination, and felt compelled to match them with his own courage. Evening came, and the colony finally began to relax slightly, believing the worst was over. But Elias remained vigilant. The radar anomaly had not disappeared. Whatever it was out there, watching, waiting. He stood at the window, scanning the horizon with his binoculars. The sunset painted the sky in shades of red and orange, reflecting off the metal hulls of the colony buildings. In that light, the woman seemed almost ethereal, her skin catching the colors and glowing softly. Elias could not explain why, but a sense of awe washed over him. As night fell, he prepared the medical bay for rest. He ensured she was comfortable, covered, and monitored. For the first time, she closed her eyes fully, relaxing in the safety of his presence. Elias sat beside her, exhausted but resolute. The storm outside had passed, but he knew challenges were only beginning. Whoever, or whatever, had caused her ship to crash was likely still out there, and now they were part of his world. He took a deep breath, staring at her peaceful face. "I don't know who you are," he whispered, "but I will not let anything happen to you." The faint glow of her skin seemed to pulse slightly, as if acknowledging his promise. It was a small reassurance, but it was enough. For now, she was safe. For now, he had kept his word, but deep down, Elias knew that this was only the beginning. The universe was vast, and somewhere beyond the stars, powers far greater than anything he had encountered were already moving, shaping the fate of the galaxy. And he had unwittingly stepped into the center of it all. The colony had settled into an uneasy quiet after the storm, but Elias' core could feel that something beyond the ordinary lingered in the air. The alien woman, still unconscious most of the time, rested on the bed he had prepared, her chest rising and falling steadily. Despite her injuries being patched and stabilized, there was an energy about her that refused to be ignored. When he looked at her skin, now faintly glowing under the dim lights of the medical bay, he noticed lines of color that pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat beyond her own. It was beautiful, yet unnerving. The colonists were curious but fearful. Many whispered about the woman, calling her the Starborn or the Stranger, afraid of what she might bring with her. Elias ignored the murmurs. He had always known humanity to be curious, cautious, and sometimes too quick to judge, but he had learned that human courage often came not from fearlessness, but from choosing to act despite fear. And now he had to act. He had barely slept that night, keeping watch over her and monitoring the strange readings from the medical equipment. Every so often she would stir, murmuring words in her alien language. Elias didn't understand them, but over time he began to notice patterns, tones that sounded urgent, others that were softer, almost soothing. She had a voice that carried weight, even in whispers. He had treated humans who were leaders, diplomats, even soldiers, but none had felt as commanding as she did, even in her weakness. By mid-morning, the first real test of Elias' instincts arrived. One of the scouts ran breathlessly into the medical bay, waving his hands. "Captain, something S on the radar, fast-moving, unidentified, not a natural phenomenon." The colony's sensors were basic, mostly old Earth technology, and yet they were picking up something moving through space at impossible speeds. "Show me," he said, grabbing the console. The display revealed a cluster of blips, moving with precision, almost like they were coordinating with each other. Elias frowned. The colony had no enemies nearby, and no human fleet could reach this sector. These were not ordinary ships. They were sleek, precise, and fast, and they were heading straight for Haven Station. "Prepare for potential contact," he said firmly, though his mind was racing. "Alert everyone, but keep calm, do not panic." She focused on the radar screen and then looked directly at Elias. "They are coming," she said, her voice weak but steady. The words startled him. How did she know? The scout's jaw dropped, and the other colonists looked at her in disbelief. "They're what?" Elias asked cautiously, keeping his tone calm. "Hunters, traitors," she replied, struggling to sit up. Her movements were slow, measured, but there was an undeniable strength in her posture, even in weakness. "Seek me." He could not let her down. The next hours were a blur of preparation. The colony had some weapons, mostly old Earth rifles, a few automated turrets and improvised defenses, but against a high-tech fleet they were almost meaningless. Still, Elias believed in humanity's greatest advantage, creativity and courage. He worked with the colonists to set up traps, create decoy positions, and reinforce structures. The alien woman remained by his side, watching and occasionally giving faint instructions. Though her language was mostly unknown, she could convey strategies with gestures, and Elias quickly adapted, trusting her instincts. He noticed something remarkable. Even in her injured state, she understood technology, energy fields, and tactics far beyond anything the humans knew. Yet she never took control entirely. She allowed them to act, to make decisions, letting human ingenuity shine. Late that afternoon, Elias took a break to observe her more closely. Her eyes followed every movement, analyzing, judging, yet not in a way that belittled them. He realized something profound. She did not see humans as weak, but as capable, as worthy of trust. That belief in humanity, even from a stranger from another world, made Elias' chest swell with pride. Then came the first encounter. A small squad of scout ships from the approaching fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel just beyond the colony's outer perimeter. Their shapes were unfamiliar, sleek, and designed for combat. They immediately began scanning the colony, searching for something or someone. Elias moved quickly. "Listen to me," he instructed the colonists. "Do exactly as I say. We may not survive this, but we can make them pay for every inch of ground. Follow me." The alien woman followed, assisted him silently, occasionally touching a panel or device, making adjustments that would have seemed impossible to humans. The first blast from the enemy ships barely missed them, scattering dust and rocks around them. During a tense moment, Elias noticed her subtly raising her hand. A faint shimmer of energy expanded outward, invisible to the eye but clearly interacting with the enemy sensors. One of the scout ships veered off, confused, as if it had detected something unusual. Elias realized then that she possessed powers far beyond their understanding. Yet she never used them to attack directly. She let human effort and ingenuity take the lead. The humans fought with courage and precision, striking when the moment was right, retreating when necessary. Elias marveled at their determination. These were not trained soldiers, but ordinary humans who had learned to survive harsh conditions and now fought to protect someone they barely understood. The alien woman watched, her expression calm but approving. As night fell, the enemy ships began to retreat temporarily, regrouping at the edge of the colony's detection range. Elias and the colonists breathed a collective sigh of relief, though he knew it was only temporary. They were alive, yes, but the danger had only grown. Back in the medical bay, the woman finally allowed herself to speak more freely. "You humans clever," she said softly, her voice carrying a tone of admiration. Elias felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. Here was someone who had conquered galaxies, commanding armies and fleets, praising humanity for ingenuity and courage. "You're a queen, aren't you?" he asked cautiously. She looked at him, eyes reflecting the dim light. "Lysera, queen of the Luminara Dominion," she said, pausing to catch her breath. "Betrayed fleet, tried to kill me, I escaped." His mind raced with possibilities, but his instincts told him something simple yet powerful. He would protect her, no matter what it cost. Over the next day, he worked tirelessly to strengthen defenses, all while learning more about her. She shared fragments of her story, treachery within her empire, factions that sought her throne, and loyalists who still waited for her guidance. Her words painted a picture of a civilization far more advanced than humanity, yet filled with the same struggles, ambition, betrayal, and the constant fight for survival. Elias realized then that the stakes were much higher than the colony itself. Protecting her was not just about saving one life. It was about preserving an entire galaxy's future. And yet he never let the weight of that knowledge paralyze him. He moved, acted, and inspired those around him. Humanity, he understood, had one advantage that even a galactic empire could not always match: courage rooted in hope and ingenuity. As night returned, the stars shone brightly over Haven Station, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just endured. The alien woman rested, her body healing, her energy faintly pulsing. Elias stood by the window, watching the horizon. He could sense movement in the darkness, knowing the traitor fleet had not gone far. They would return, and next time the fight would be even more dangerous. Yet he felt no fear. Fear had its place, but it was action that mattered. He had faced storms, raids, and uncertainty before. This time it was different, not because of the alien woman's power, but because human courage had earned her trust. That trust was more valuable than any weapon, more powerful than any fleet. It was a bond forged in compassion, bravery, and the willingness to act when others hesitated. Elias looked at her one last time before retiring for a few hours of rest. Her eyes flickered open briefly, and she gave him a faint nod, acknowledging his promise. He returned the gesture, silently reaffirming his commitment. No matter what came next, they would face it together. The galaxy might be vast and filled with dangers beyond comprehension, but here, on this tiny colony, humanity had already begun to prove its worth. Somewhere out there, among the stars, forces were gathering. Ships would arrive, battles would be fought, and choices would have consequences that echoed across light years. But Elias did not dwell on the enormity of it. He focused on what he could control, preparing, protecting, and trusting in the courage of humans. Because in the face of the unknown, it was humanity's courage, ingenuity, and willingness to act that made the difference. And for the first time, Elias' core truly understood that humans were capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with the greatest powers in the universe, even a galactic queen. The night deepened. The wind outside had calmed, leaving the silence broken only by the hum of the colony's systems. Elias sat in quiet contemplation, watching over the alien woman, readying himself for whatever the stars would bring next. They had survived the first encounter, but the true test was only beginning. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of detection, the traitor fleet moved closer, unaware that the humans they underestimated would not only protect a queen but might change the fate of the galaxy forever. The morning sun rose over Haven Station, casting long shadows across the rocky plateau. Elias' core had been awake for hours, moving through the colony like a man possessed, checking defensive positions, communicating with scouts, and making sure every system, every weapon, and every barricade was ready. The previous day's encounter with the mysterious fleet had been a wake-up call. They were not ordinary intruders. They were skilled, efficient, and relentless. And somewhere in those ships was a force determined to capture the alien woman who now rested under his care. She had been quiet that morning, her eyes closed, her breathing steady. But Elias could feel her presence, strong even in stillness. He approached her bedside cautiously. "Lysera," he said softly, using the name she had given him the night before. "We need to know more about what we're facing. Can you help me understand them?" "Must survive to reclaim." Her voice grew weaker, and she paused, exhaustion weighing on her. Elias nodded, understanding more than the words themselves conveyed. She was a leader of a civilization far beyond humanity, and her enemies were cunning, ruthless, and well-equipped. Elias realized the situation was no longer just about survival. This was about strategy, courage, and the capacity of humans to rise to a challenge that dwarfed anything they had faced before. The alien woman, despite her injuries, began to teach him subtle lessons. She showed him how to read patterns in the fleet's movements, anticipate their tactics, and use the environment to their advantage. It was remarkable to watch, human intelligence guided by alien insight, creating a combination neither side could ignore. By mid-morning, scouts reported activity at the edge of the plateau. Small drones, almost invisible to the naked eye, hovered just beyond the colony's sensor range. Elias gathered a small team, including a few of the colony's best trackers, and moved silently toward the perimeter. The alien woman, Lysera, accompanied them, leaning on a makeshift cane for support, but her presence alone seemed to command respect. The drones moved in precise formations, scanning the colony. Elias instructed his team to stay hidden and observe. "We need to understand them first," he whispered. The drones were probing, searching for weaknesses, yet each movement they made revealed patterns. Elias' mind worked quickly, noting timings, distances, and potential blind spots. Suddenly, one drone detected movement. A small alarm sounded, and the scout team froze. But Lysera stepped forward, her hand raised in a subtle gesture. The drone froze midair, then hovered silently before retreating. Elias' jaw dropped. He realized that the Queen's presence was not just symbolic. She could manipulate energy, subtly influence technology, and affect even distant machines without touching them. Yet she never acted aggressively. She only guided humanity to use their strengths. Returning to the colony, Elias felt a growing admiration for both her and his people. Humanity was capable of incredible feats when guided by intelligence, courage, and determination. He began to see that the alien woman's greatest gift was not her power, but her faith in humans' potential. As night approached, the trader fleet made its first full appearance. Massive ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel just beyond the colony's perimeter, blocking the horizon. They were sleek, deadly, and bristling with weapons far beyond anything Elias had ever seen. The colony's defenses would be barely enough to survive a direct attack. Elias called the colony together in the central hall. "Listen to me," he said, his voice firm. "We are facing enemies with technology far beyond ours, but they are not unbeatable. Humans have something they don't expect: courage, ingenuity, and the willingness to fight for something greater than themselves. We will defend this colony. We will defend Lysera. And we will prove that humans are not weak." Colonists who had been fearful and uncertain now stood taller, shoulders squared, eyes alight with resolve. Elias felt a surge of pride. They spent the next few hours preparing. Traps were set around the perimeter, decoys placed to confuse the enemy's sensors, and barricades reinforced. Energy fields salvaged from Lysera's damaged ship were integrated into the colony's defenses, creating shields in areas where the human systems alone would have failed. Every step of the preparation emphasized collaboration, humans acting boldly, guided by Lysera's insight. As the first beams of the trader fleet's weapons struck the outer walls, Elias and the colonists responded with calculated precision. The decoys worked. Enemy sensors were confused. Human sharpshooters used the rocky terrain to their advantage, striking targets quickly and retreating before counterattacks could reach them. Lysera remained at the command center, monitoring the battle, providing subtle guidance, and occasionally activating energy fields to protect the colonists. Elias marveled at the synergy. Humans, even without advanced technology, were resilient, clever, and fearless when given the opportunity to rise, and Lysera's trust in them inspired them to act boldly. She never interfered with their decisions, never took control, but her guidance amplified their effectiveness exponentially. Hours passed, and the trader fleet began to retreat temporarily. Elias knew it was only a tactical withdrawal. They would return, stronger and perhaps more cunning. He gathered the colonists for a brief rest, urging them to eat, drink, and recover. The victory had been small but significant. It proved something to the enemy and, more importantly, to themselves. Humans were not to be underestimated. In the quiet of the medical bay, Lysera spoke to Elias privately. "You lead well your people, courage. Surprising, I underestimated humans, but no more. You have potential greater than I imagined." Elias felt a mixture of pride and humility. It was one thing for colonists to praise him, but the recognition of a galactic queen, one who had commanded fleets, conquered systems, and survived betrayals beyond imagination, was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," he said simply. "But it's not just me. The colony, everyone here, has proven their worth. We're capable of more than we sometimes realize." Each engagement forced the humans to adapt, to improvise, and to push themselves beyond perceived limits. Elias found that the more the humans were trusted to act, the more capable they became. They were not perfect, mistakes were made, injuries occurred, but their resilience never faltered. Lysera continued to teach in subtle ways, guiding strategies, improving defenses, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. She shared fragments of her past, stories of her empire, of loyalists waiting for her return, and of the treachery that had forced her to flee. Elias listened intently, absorbing every detail, understanding more about the stakes, and realizing that protecting her was not just about survival. It was about safeguarding an entire civilization. One evening, a scout returned with a warning. A large portion of the traitor fleet had mobilized, moving to encircle the colony. Ilias knew that the coming battle would be the most dangerous they had faced yet. He gathered the leaders of the colony in the command center. "This will be the fight that defines us," he said. "We've survived so far because we adapted, because we fought together, and because we trusted one another. Now we must do it again, only with even more courage. We will protect Lysera, and we will show the galaxy that humans are not weak." Shields were activated, weapons were checked, and every detail was reviewed. The sense of unity was palpable. Fear still existed, it always would, but it had been transformed into determination. They were ready to stand against forces far greater than themselves, guided by courage, ingenuity, and the faith of a being whose power spanned the stars. From the observation deck, Ilias watched the horizon. The lights of the approaching fleet glinted against the void, silent but deadly. He thought of the alien woman resting in the command center, her faint glow a reminder of what they were fighting for. He thought of his people, of their resilience, and of the promise they had made to protect her at all costs. He knew that the coming hours would test them all, but he also knew something profound. Humanity had the ability to rise, to fight, and to survive even when the odds were impossibly against them. And in that truth there was power, there was hope. And somewhere deep in the cosmos, far beyond the reach of human senses, forces were already watching, calculating, and underestimating the very species they assumed would be easy prey. They did not know that humans, guided by heart, courage, and trust, could change the course of events that stretched across galaxies. Ilias turned to Lysera, who gave him a faint smile, one that carried both gratitude and approval. It was quiet, but it said everything. They were ready. The battle had not yet begun, but the first spark had been lit. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had begun to shine. The night was deep and heavy, blanketing Haven Station in a thick silence that felt unnatural after the relentless chaos of the past days. Ilia's corps moved through the colony, checking barricades and giving last-minute instructions to the colonists. Every person was tense but determined, each aware that the next hours could decide the fate of their lives, and the life of the alien woman who had become the center of everything. Lysera remained in the command center, leaning slightly against a reinforced console. Her eyes glimmered like twin galaxies as she observed the preparations. She had healed remarkably, though her strength was still limited. Yet her presence radiated authority. She spoke quietly to Ilias, her voice carrying a calm assurance. "They will come with full force. Humans must use mind and heart, not just weapons." He had been preparing the colony for every conceivable attack, yet he knew that no matter how careful he had been, the odds were stacked against them. The enemy fleet had greater numbers, superior technology, and experience in conquest. But Ilias had something they could not anticipate: humans' ability to improvise, to adapt, and to fight with courage born from necessity. The first attack came as a distant hum that grew into the roar of engines. From the observation decks, scouts reported dozens of ships entering the colony's perimeter. They moved in tight formations, scanning for any sign of Lysera. Ilias could see the colored beams of energy slicing through the darkness as the attackers tested the colony's shields. The colonists braced themselves, hearts pounding yet resolute. Ilias moved among them, offering calm words and encouragement. "Stick to the plan. Watch each other's backs. Remember, we are humans, and humans survive by thinking, by acting, by refusing to give up. We can do this." His words carried weight, not because of authority alone, but because they were backed by experience, courage, and unwavering commitment. The alien woman's influence was subtle but crucial. She activated energy shields salvaged from her ship, creating protective barriers at key points. The colonists had no idea exactly how she did it, only that the shields responded to her gestures. Combined with the traps and decoys Ilias had set, the attackers found themselves confused and slowed. One ship miscalculated its approach and crashed into the rocky terrain, its lights flickering and dying. The colony erupted in a quiet cheer. Victory was far from certain, but human creativity and courage were making a difference. During a lull in the battle, Ilias gathered a small strike team to reinforce one of the outer barricades. Lysera insisted on accompanying them, despite her weakened state. She guided them, pointing out structural weaknesses in the barricade and suggesting ways to optimize defense. Ilias marveled at her insight. Even in her injured condition, she could see patterns, predict enemy movements, and enhance human strategy. As they worked, the first real breach occurred. One of the enemy ships had found a blind spot, unleashing a wave of energy that destroyed part of the outer fence. Elias reacted instantly, leading a counterattack to drive them back. Humans armed with rifles and improvised weapons moved swiftly, using the terrain to their advantage. They threw explosives, launched harpoons, and activated traps designed to disrupt enemy sensors. Lysera's hands moved in subtle gestures, activating energy pulses that shielded them from direct hits. Every move seemed effortless, yet Elias knew it required immense focus and power. "We must hold them here," she said calmly, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Every second we survive counts." Elias coordinated their movements with precision, drawing on both his experience and Lysera's guidance. Time and again, humans improvised solutions that no advanced technology could predict. At one point, a group of colonists found themselves trapped in a narrow canyon while an enemy drone hovered above, scanning for targets. Elias knew a direct confrontation would be deadly. Instead, he instructed the group to create a mirror decoy using reflective panels and lights. The drone was fooled, its sensors reading false signatures. Elias and his team led the colonists out safely, a small victory in the larger battle. Lysera watched, nodding approvingly. "Clever humans use mind, not just arms," she whispered. By dawn, the battle had reached its peak. The enemy fleet had split into multiple groups, trying to flank the colony from all directions. Elias realized that a direct defense was no longer enough. They needed to take the fight to the enemy, to disrupt their formations and buy time for the colony to reinforce its defenses. He gathered a strike team, including the colony's best pilots and engineers, and prepared a daring plan. "Listen carefully," Elias said. "We're going to hit them where they least expect it. Use the terrain, use traps, and above all, move quickly. Lysera will provide shielding support. We have one chance to disrupt their formation. If we succeed, we gain time. If we fail—" He let the words hang, but no one flinched. Courage ran deep here in every human willing to fight for life and survival. The strike team moved under cover of night, using rocky outcrops and shadows to approach the enemy. As they neared the fleet's flank, Lysera's energy shields created a corridor of safety, deflecting detection beams and attacks. Humans darted from cover to cover, setting explosives and sabotaging enemy sensors. Elias led from the front, his rifle steady, his mind focused. Every movement counted. Every decision mattered. The enemy reacted with speed, but human ingenuity prevailed. A clever use of the terrain caused one of the lead ships to collide with a hidden barricade, knocking out critical systems. Other ships were forced to retreat temporarily, their formations disrupted. Elias allowed himself a small smile. The humans had done what seemed impossible. They had turned the tide, if only temporarily, using courage, creativity, and collaboration. Returning to the colony, Elias and Lysera observed the results of their efforts. The enemy had been delayed, giving the colony precious hours to repair damage, redistribute defenses, and tend to the wounded. The colonists had proven themselves capable of acts far beyond what the enemy expected. Humans, with their resourcefulness and determination, had made a difference in a battle that should have been hopeless. In the quiet that followed, Elias finally allowed himself a moment to reflect. Lysera approached him, her steps slow but purposeful. "You, humans, fight with heart." "I underestimated spirit of this species," she said. Her words carried weight. Not praise for her own power, but recognition of humanity's courage. Elias nodded. "We fight because we have to. We fight because we care. We fight because giving up is never an option. Remember, courage makes difference always." Elias realized that this was the essence of humanity, a species capable of rising to challenges that seemed insurmountable. Lysera began to trust the humans more openly, sharing fragments of strategy and tactical knowledge that allowed the colony to anticipate enemy moves. She praised their creativity, their courage, and their willingness to work together. Every day, Elias witnessed acts of bravery that reminded him why humans could survive and even thrive against the most powerful forces in the galaxy. One night, as the stars shone brightly above the plateau, Elias stood with Lysera overlooking the colony. The battle had not yet ended, but for the first time he felt hope. "We've come far," he said quietly, "but I know the fleet isn't done. They'll return, and I trust you humans to rise when needed." The stage was set for the final confrontation. The traitor fleet would return, stronger and more determined than ever, but the humans of Haven Station were ready. They had proven themselves capable of standing against overwhelming odds, not because of superior weapons, but because of courage, ingenuity, and heart, the true strengths of humanity. And somewhere deep in the cosmos, the forces that sought to capture the Queen would learn a lesson they would not forget. Humans were not weak. Humans could rise, adapt, and prevail even against the most powerful adversaries in the galaxy. Elias looked at Lysera, who gave him a faint smile, her eyes glimmering like the stars above. "We are ready," he said quietly. "No matter what comes, we will face it together." But Elias knew one thing with absolute clarity. Humanity had already begun to shine, and nothing, not even the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, could extinguish that light. The horizon burned faintly with the lights of the approaching fleet, each ship a sharp, cold glint against the dark of space. Elias Core stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, his jaw tight, his mind racing. Every system was checked, every weapon prepared, every colonist ready. The traitor fleet was coming back, and this time there would be no temporary retreat, no small victories to ease the tension. This would be the battle that decided everything: the colony, the alien queen, and perhaps even the fate of an empire. Lysera stood beside him, her energy faintly pulsing across her skin, glowing in a rhythm that seemed to match the colony's heartbeat. She had recovered more than anyone expected, but Elias could still see the strain in her movements. Despite that, her presence radiated calm and authority. "They come with full force," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Humans must act with mind and courage. Strength alone is not enough. We fight for life, for freedom, and for the trust of someone who believes in us." The enemy fleet advanced steadily, weapon systems locked and scanning. Elias activated the colony's shields, augmented by Lysera's energy fields. A wave of protective energy shimmered across the perimeter, deflecting the first salvo of enemy fire. Rocks and dust were ripped from the ground, thrown into the air by the impact, yet the colony's defenses held. The human colonists cheered briefly, though Elias reminded them that the fight was far from over. "Focus on their patterns," Lysera instructed. "See their movements, anticipate. Do not waste energy unnecessarily." Her gestures caused subtle energy pulses to extend over key points, reinforcing shields and disrupting enemy targeting systems. Elias marveled at how she could influence the battle without taking direct control. She trusted humans to act, and in doing so, she amplified their effectiveness beyond what mere technology could achieve. Elias led a strike team toward the flanks of the enemy formation. Using rocky ridges and hidden canyons, they moved swiftly and silently, dodging detection. When the first enemy scouts detected them, they were met with a combination of human improvisation and Lysera's subtle energy manipulations. Sensors were confused, paths were blocked, and the humans were able to sabotage critical systems on several of the attacking ships. The enemy fleet responded quickly, adjusting their strategy and concentrating fire on the colony. Energy beams tore through the rocky landscape, shattering barricades and igniting small fires. Elias and the colonists reacted with speed and precision, repairing defenses, redirecting energy, and using terrain to their advantage. The humans were small in number but remarkable in resourcefulness. They moved like shadows, striking where the enemy least expected and retreating before retaliation could occur. Lysera guided them continuously, her gestures subtle but precise. Energy shields rose just in time to protect critical positions, while enemy targeting systems were disrupted enough to create confusion. Elias realized that the Queen's trust in human ingenuity was the key. She had not taken over, she had let humanity act, and they had risen to the occasion magnificently. Hours passed in a blur of combat. The colony endured wave after wave of attacks, and each time humans adapted. They learned patterns in the enemy's movements, exploited weaknesses, and coordinated in ways that the fleet did not anticipate. Engineers rigged improvised devices to disable enemy sensors, medics moved swiftly to treat the wounded, and scouts relayed real-time intelligence that allowed rapid decision-making. Every human contributed, every skill mattered, and every act of bravery counted. At a critical moment, a group of colonists was trapped near the outer perimeter while a heavily armed enemy ship approached. The situation seemed hopeless. Elias assessed the terrain and the enemy's position quickly. He instructed the trapped colonists to create reflective decoys and to use smoke and dust to obscure their movement. Simultaneously, Lysera extended a faint energy barrier, deflecting incoming fire. The colonists followed the instructions perfectly, and the enemy ship miscalculated its approach, exposing a vulnerability that Ilia's strike team exploited. The ship was disabled, and the trapped colonists were saved. Lysera's eyes met Ilia's, conveying approval and admiration. "Clever humans, you adapt, survive, fight. We just need to trust them to act." He formulated a bold plan, a coordinated counterstrike using every advantage they had: human ingenuity, terrain, decoys, and Lysera's subtle energy manipulations. He briefed the strike teams, moving among them with calm authority. "This is our chance," he said. "We are small, but we are clever. We have heart, courage, and the trust of someone the enemy cannot understand. We will disrupt their formation, buy time, and force them to retreat. Follow your instincts, trust your training, and trust each other." Energy shields flickered, and Lysera's guidance ensured that the humans remained protected and coordinated. The enemy fleet was thrown into confusion. Their superior numbers were less effective because they could not anticipate the humans' creativity and adaptability. Ilias led the final assault, moving directly into the enemy's weak points. His strike team disabled weapon systems, disrupted communication networks, and created openings that allowed the colony's defenses to hold more effectively. Every action was a calculated risk, every movement required precision, but humanity's courage and resourcefulness prevailed. Lysera remained in the command center, amplifying shields and providing subtle tactical guidance. She had trusted humans to act, and they had risen magnificently. She saw the brilliance of human ingenuity firsthand, realizing that even the galaxy's greatest empires could underestimate the power of courage, creativity, and determination. The climax of the battle came when Ilias led a daring maneuver to disable the enemy fleet's command ship. Using terrain, decoys, and a combination of human ingenuity and Lysera's energy manipulation, they infiltrated the enemy formation. The command ship was incapacitated, and with its destruction, the coordination of the traitor fleet collapsed. One by one, the enemy ships began to retreat. Ilias watched from the observation deck as the lights of the fleet disappeared into the distance. The battle was over, and against overwhelming odds, humanity had prevailed. The colony had survived, and Lysera remained safe, a testament to the courage, ingenuity, and determination of humans. In the aftermath, Ilias walked through the colony, observing the exhausted but triumphant faces of the colonists. They had fought bravely, adapting and improvising in ways that even the alien queen had admired. Humans had proven themselves capable of standing against overwhelming odds, not because of superior technology, but because of their resilience, creativity, and courage. Lysera approached Ilias, her presence serene and commanding. "Humans, you have proven strength, courage, heart. I underestimated you. You are worthy." The colony repaired damage, cared for the wounded, and strengthened defenses. Ilias worked alongside everyone, his leadership recognized not as domination but as guidance, coordination, and inspiration. The humans had discovered something profound. When trusted, they could rise to challenges beyond their imagination. Lysera remained with the colony, recovering fully and advising on future strategies. She began forming a new alliance between humanity and the Luminara Dominion, recognizing the humans' bravery, ingenuity, and potential. She often spoke to Ilias privately. "Humans are remarkable. I will ensure Galaxy knows their worth." They had survived a threat that should have been impossible to overcome. They had proven to themselves and to the galaxy that humans were capable of courage, resilience, and brilliance even against the most powerful adversaries. One evening, Ilias and Lysera stood together on a plateau overlooking the colony. The sky was clear, stars glittering above as if celebrating the victory. "You've changed my view of humanity," she said softly. "I believed we were the most capable, but now I see humans rise in ways unexpected and powerful." Lysera's presence had revealed humanity's potential, and humanity's courage had proven their worth to a galactic queen. Together, they had forged a bond that went beyond fear, beyond power, and beyond survival. And so, Haven Station, once a small, forgotten colony at the edge of explored space, became a symbol of human courage, ingenuity, and resilience. A reminder that even against overwhelming odds, humans could rise, adapt, and prevail. The galaxy had witnessed their strength, and humanity's place among the stars was now acknowledged not by force but by virtue of heart, mind, and spirit. Ilias looked at Lysera and then back at the colony. "We did it," he said quietly. She smiled, a faint glow of approval emanating from her energy fields. Yes, humans, you did, and the galaxy will never forget. And somewhere far beyond the edge of explored space, beings who had doubted humanity now understood that small, courageous humans could stand against the mightiest powers, protect a queen, and change the fate of the galaxy itself. Haven Station had survived. Humanity had triumphed. And Ilia's core, standing beside a galaxy's greatest queen, knew that this was only the beginning of what humans could achieve among the stars.